I have always been interested in creativity and in creative artistic expression activities for all my life. So at certain point, when I was at the fork road and deciding what I'm supposed to do with my life, I had this idea that I want to dedicate myself to teaching creativity to the others. So that led me to the Master of Science and Creativity in Buffalo State College, an international center for studies in creativity, and to discover the whole process of creative problem solving and creative thinking facilitation. But when I was studying it and while I was working as a creative thinking facilitator, I have always had this feeling that what I'm more interested in is the process of personal transformation. It was always more interesting for me to work with individuals one-on-one and work on their personal problems rather than facilitating groups. That led me also to the coaching, and I have always been interested in the practices that led us to the body awareness. So in the end, a couple of years ago, I had discovered the work of one of my teachers, Stephen Gilligan, on generative trance, and it led me to connecting all these dots, of all my previous path in creativity research and my creativity work and my practice as creativity professional. So it's actually really connects, it allows me to see in the systematic way how we can lead this personal transformation and help each person to connect to this deep creative potential that we all have inside.
Okay, and a lot of people would say that when any learning takes place, any deep learning, the outcome is usually transformation of some sort. There's a transformation in the way people behave after they've learned something new, in the way they think, in their attitudes. So is creativity almost synonymous with deep learning?
Interesting question. Well, it all, I think it all depends. It will get us back to the first question that every conversation in creativity starts with, how we define creativity. Yeah, so if we go back to this most standard definition that creativity is creating something novel and useful or has value, then the question is novel and useful for whom? Yeah, and so if we agree that we accept that, for example, in this mini C level of creativity, that we are okay, but if it's novel and useful for the person and it's novel for the person, then it is creative. Then in this sense, I guess, yes, any deep learning will be some sort of creative process for the person itself. It might not lead to any new discovery that will change the humanity, but for the personal process, yes, I guess we might say so.
Yeah, because it will transform the person's life.
Yeah,
it will have an impact on others,
and it will be novel in certain extent for this person. Yeah.
Yes, because they've learned something they were not aware of before. Then let's talk about the creative process.
We have seen definitely, there are plenty of models that describe or intend to describe the creative process from the scientific point of view. And what we know that it is never a linear process. So there are all these stages, but we also know that they may go from one stage to stage 3, and then back to stage 2, and then back to stage 1 again. So it's always back and forth, and it may be chaotic. So instead of really describing the process, what stages it has, I always like more to describe what elements has the creative process. And we can take these elements from different models that we have been, being able to observe in the creativity research literature in the recent decades, for example. But, then if we focus on the elements rather than like you go from the step 1 then to step 3 then to step 5, then it is much more flexible and allows us to be more unique in each case, and for each person to know, like, okay, I know what happens when this happens, and like these are the ways I may treat it, but it's not necessary that I always have to do 1, 2, 3. So I'm thinking this way. What has always interested me is the connection between the creativity and consciousness. And for me, one of the most important elements in creative process, for example, is suspending judgment. And it is related very much, like in my understanding, really to our state, consciousness state, like the awareness, the state of our awareness, how we are able to manage really like what we're aware of and how we deal with this, like this state of acceptance, what I'm talking in my video. And this is the thing that what is consciousness and how it works, this like we know very little about. Even we can't even formulate on the theoretical level what we're talking about. So I think like this is the direction that can open up and broaden a lot more perspective on creativity too. For what I have noticed, it has been paid more and more attention in the research field, like to the role of the unconscious processes in the creativity and creative thinking and creative processes. But definitely, like, because it is unconscious, it is difficult for us to understand what actually happens inside. And I think also understanding like this dichotomy, conscious versus unconscious, also like would help us to understand better like how it all works. So yeah, I definitely agree. It is very important part, like the unconscious processing, the unconscious thinking, the role it has, like how we deal with it, how we integrate it and accept it in our creative process and in our life. Basically, generally, my philosophy in life is that the more we may become aware of these unconscious processes that drive us, then the more actually we have the potential for transformation and for true creative growth. But I think it is also important to remember that it is not only about the unconscious. It's not only about like just let us flow and let us freely express our unconscious. It is really the combination. That is why I'm connecting, or I'm talking about the connecting that connect and connected, because it is, because the deliberate conscious thinking also, like, it is a marvelous tool and it may lead to great results, and it is very important. So it is about the combination, about the dancing, the balance between the two.
Okay.
But I think it's just because, like, we have this thing for something, and it is it is our great evolutionary advantage, our mind and our brain. So it is really, I think we can't lose like all the brilliance that we have just for like, okay, let's go with our animal nature. Like, it is because like the combination of our consciousness and the unconscious, the mind and the body, is what makes us human. Like, just with the body, with the unconscious, we're just animals, and just only with the mind, we are artificial intelligence, which will be much more efficient when it finally comes, and like we have only a few years left to wait for it. So it's really the combination of the two that puts us above any possible robots.
So you're very interested in the mind-body connection. In
Yes.
terms of our physical abilities, we are all limited. There are things that, an athletic person can do that a non-athletic person can't do. Do you think those same sort of limitations are relevant at the mind level, or do you think it's more a question of infinite possibilities and a democratic approach to creativity at the mind level?
Well, I think, yes, of course, we are all limited. Creativity is about limitations. You know, like it needs limitations to be creative. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, whatever happens. But this is the thing, okay? So like one person is capable of one thing, another person is capable of another thing, and for both to be creative, they need to discover their uniqueness. So yes, it's not about, you know, like I'm limited, I can't be like this other person, so like I'm below this other person. No, just I'm just different. And it is about for each other person to discover, okay, what are my limits, what I think are my limits, and are they really the limits? How can I transcend them? What can help me in this? And it's always, you know, like pushing the boundaries a little bit, or making them more flexible and see what we may become. But we won't be equal, you know, like each person will be different.
Right, unique. Each person
Exactly.
is unique. And in terms of the purpose of education, for many people, education is about enabling the person to conform and to slot into their position in society. With creativity, do you think that we can shift our positions? Do you think that we have more choice about how we position ourselves, or do you think it's still going to be taking up the position that society has reserved for us?
I think it's not just we can, we must. I think nowadays, you know, like with the ways how things are going, we don't have other choice. Like the society is just by definition is conformist, because otherwise it can't exist. But what we see, you know, like all these crises we go through, you know, like all these destructions of all models and all systems, I think it is, you know, like for us, the only way to survive will be for each one to discover our own uniqueness and to act out of this uniqueness and to see how each of this uniqueness can interweave into something new, into more whole. We won't be able to function just, you know, like we used to be, occupying this place that someone is supposed for us.
Well, you're totally right in saying like society needs to be conformist in order to exist, but creativity is about disrupting those patterns somehow.
Yeah,